Good morning, everybody. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on employing and managing an apprentice. My name's Amanda Chadwick. It is the 16th of October 2019, and this webinar will run for approximately 30 to 45 minutes. I'm here on behalf of the CIPD HR Inform. So, just a note, the detail contained within this webinar is based on GB employment legislation. Any clients that are listening and you are in Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, although we are going to put some bits on today about Northern Ireland, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, you're asked to please contact us directly just to obtain information relevant to your jurisdiction. As I said, my name is Amanda Chadwick, and today's webinar it is all about apprenticeships. So the objectives of today are to gain practical advice on the differences a contract of apprenticeship and an apprenticeship agreement, distinguishing between an apprentice and an employee, and making use of the levy, and then frequently asked questions. So who can employ an apprentice? So current government drive to encourage organisations to employ apprenticeships. So myself, I started, I don't know if anybody's listening here that's of a similar age, I started on a YTS, which was very similar to an apprenticeship in the day. Fantastic opportunity for me, got my foot in the door, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time as a YTS. Amazing opportunity. So for somebody who's not, doesn't like the classroom environment and wants to learn on the job, it's an amazing a chance to get some employment experience. And a recent study by the University of Warwick found that every £1 spent on an apprentice generates £18 for the economy. Funding is available to organisations who do take on apprentices. Organisations can use apprentices to fill future skills gaps. So what we might have, for example, is a stonemason who's an aging stonemason that has amazing skills and needs to pass them on to somebody. So an apprenticeship in that type of skill industry would be brilliant. So reduce unemployment by aiding younger people into work as well. But like I said, I know a lot of people, my son is one of them. He is academic, but he's got to the point now where he's just sick of the classroom environment. So for him, actually an apprenticeship might be a great idea, because he can have that one day at college and then the rest of the week be learning and making friends, earning a bit of money. What is a contract of apprenticeship? A contract in common law that governs apprenticeships in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then what we've got is an apprenticeship agreement, which is the written agreement that governs apprenticeships in England and Wales. And years ago, what used to happen is there was none of this in place. There was no contract, there was no apprenticeship. And what used to happen was I would have a child coming out of school, have a friend that had a business, and simply say, would you take them on as an apprentice? And people just used the word apprentice. They didn't actually have any contracts or agreements in place. And what we saw is the young workers being exploited. We saw them not receiving a contract, not getting contractual rights, not getting stability, not having breaks, etc. So let's remember that there is no statutory apprenticeship scheme that operates in Scotland. Instead, if you have part of your business based in Scotland, apprenticeships are governed by common law and are employed on a common law contract of apprenticeship. The Apprenticeship Skills, Children and Learning Act 2009 applies to England and Wales, and this governs the apprenticeship. So the Act provides that apprentices are to be engaged on apprenticeships agreements. So there is a difference there. So a contract of apprenticeship. So what we've got to remember here is that this is somebody walking into your business about to step into their first, I think in most cases, journey in employment. So we have to make this a very positive experience. They are very protected. We cannot dismiss in the probationary period. You cannot generally dismiss on the grounds of redundancy. It has to be for a fixed period of time to complete the apprenticeship, and we cannot dismiss before that. And I'll talk about Flett v Matheson 2006. And by the way, that reference material is available on the CIPD HR Inform. So conduct issues. So if there is a conduct issue, you must be able to show going above and beyond to support the apprentice. So this is the traditional understanding of an apprentice. So redundancy, if you are thinking about redundancy, need to consider them as the last man standing unless the business is closing down. There is still an expectation to assist with getting work for an apprentice in these types of situations. And when we look at a fixed period of time, example like a 1 or 2 or 3 year period, it needs to be built into the contract. So we have key cases which states contract of apprenticeship dismissal before the end date was very difficult, and that references to the Fleet v Matheson, and you can get that on the CIPD HR Inform case studies to refer to. And if you have got a problem with somebody's conduct, I do think, as I said I say at all these webinars and any seminar I do, the 3 messages I give in life, and I take these in my personal life as well and utilize them both in work and at home, is you've got to speak to people. You know, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't speak about things. So if there is a conduct issue, it's about speaking. The other one, while you're listening to me, the other 2 are laughter in the workplace, laughter at home, and sleep as well. So, you know, making sure your staff have this work-life balance, but also having enough sleep. The same goes for your home life as well. So conduct issues, it might be mobile phones, etc. I really do feel an attitude that if you speak to them directly, then you're teaching them. So you need to show you are committed to their learning and supporting them. And widely used term that we talk about in employment law is in loco parentis, which is Latin for you are in place of the parent. So that's this is what you're doing. They're there to learn. They're there. So in a contract of apprenticeship, you cannot generally dismiss them for capability. So this conflicts with the principle of learning, and you expect them to be incapable for a period of time. So you cannot generally dismiss for capability. Compensation. So what we've got to remember here, during the compensation process and tribunals, a lot of apprenticeships will claim they never got trained properly. So what I always say, when you give documentation out, whether it be an apprentice or whether it be an employee or anybody you're giving training to, remember, a hard word to challenge in law is understand. So whenever you give something out like the induction form, when you give something out like training, when you give the employee handbook, the safety handbook out, you have a piece of paper and it says, I have read and understood. I have read and understand, or I have understood the training, for example. It's very hard for somebody to come back then and say, I didn't understand what you were going on about. So it's very important when you're talking about capability, that you have given proper training and that you can prove that you have. So compensation at a tribunal for loss of trade or status. So you know, somebody, if you're saying that somebody didn't do the job properly, they weren't capable of doing that, and you go to tribunal, they will claim that maybe they weren't trained properly. So you need to gather evidence, and I talk about this defence that you have in employment law, in health and safety law. You're actually guilty until you prove yourself innocent. This is where all your documents, your policies and your procedures come in, and also the documents that say I've read, I've understood, I was trained, I understood the training. This is your defence, basically. You can dismiss, but it's really generally very difficult to remove an apprentice from the business because, and this is very important that you remember this, an apprentice is there in business to learn and secondly to work. So they're there for you to mentor them, to learn from them, but also to work, and that's secondly. So let's remember that with apprenticeships and apprenticeship agreements. And so an apprenticeship agreement, there are 2 types of an apprenticeship agreement, the old style and the new style. So due to the phasing out of an apprenticeship frameworks and the introduction of apprenticeship standards, and this is why, you know, we're phasing them out, because obviously there's a crossover here. So the old style used to be used in all cases in Wales and those cases in England where no standard has yet been created to replace the framework. The new style is to be used in England where a standard exists, so approved English apprenticeships. And I'm sure whoever you're getting the apprenticeship through will have, you know, template, or you should be using the CIPD HR Inform ones. So what we have now is the apprenticeship agreements. The three distinct fundamental points are required in the old style agreements. So number one, what we have is agreement must state the detail of the relevant qualifying apprenticeship, the framework example. So construction build in England, for example. If we look at number two, agreement must state the skill, the trade, the occupation the individual is receiving training in, for example, like a painter or a decorator. And then we have number three, a statement to the effect the agreement is governed by the law of England and Wales. So it tells you who is the governing party of this. So just to remind you, this is an abbreviation, but the Apprenticeship Skills, Children and Learning Act 2009. So if you see this abbreviated anywhere, it's ASCLA. And this was put in place in April 2012. So if I abbreviate that again, ASCLA, remembering that it is the Apprenticeship Skills, Children and Learning Act 2009, makes it clear that the apprentice agreement is a contract of service and not a contract of apprenticeship. Apprentice agreements are primarily, I am really, it's all those Rice Krispie cakes I ate earlier on this morning, are primarily doing a job rather than training. So it means do not have traditional rights over those of other employees. And these are paramount to an apprentice agreement. And if any aspect is missing, it has the potential to make the agreement null and void. So you really do need to get this spot on and correct. You can't just shove a piece of paper in place and say this is an apprenticeship agreement. You must state the detail of the relevant qualifying apprenticeship. An agreement must state the skill, and a statement to the effect from the agreement is governed by the law of England and Wales. So you need to make sure that is actually spot on. So excuse me. So what we have now is the apprenticeship agreements. The old style agreements must also have third party involvement. So they must be going to college. They must be having a training provider. You can't just put somebody on an apprenticeship with none of that. So if any of the three prescribed elements are missing, the individual cannot be treated as an employee studying an apprenticeship under the Act. In this situation, the court may fall back to the position of a contract of apprentice. So it's not just someone who's brought it on as a trainee under an employer's training scheme, but excuse me a minute, but must be an approved scheme of attainment recognised qualification. You will have to have some documentation between the learning provider and the apprentice. So look at your documentation and check it. If the correct agreement is not in place or one or more of the prescribed elements are missing, then they're not an apprentice under the Act, and a court, as I said, may fall back to the position of a contract of apprentice and therefore give them more protection, even though the legal position is that an apprentice must be on an apprenticeship agreement. So they'll just think you haven't done your job, you don't know your stuff, you're not doing due diligence. And a number of apprentice relevant points are time off for learning, communication with the learning provider, failing examinations, failing to attend examinations, and linking into capability procedures, etc. So what we have here is the new style agreements do not need the three elements, but must. One, provide for the apprentice to receive training in order to assist the apprentice to achieve the apprenticeship standard, set out the length of the apprenticeship, and state how much off-the-job training the apprentice will receive. So the apprentices that we have, and you may have an area of your business where you have a place in Scotland or Northern Ireland, so you're employing somebody from there. Again, let's remind you here, number one, they must be on a contract of apprenticeship and may have a third party provider involved, be working towards a nationally recognised qualification. They may have time away from work to attend college, and it's important not to confuse an apprentice with an employee who is just undertaking training. So the apprentices in England and Wales will be managed by an apprenticeship agreement. The type will depend on the location and whether a standard or a framework applies. Number 2, be learning a trade, skill or occupation through a regulatory apprenticeship framework. And 3, may have time away from work to attend college or receive training from a provider. So managing the apprenticeships, you need to ensure that the contract reflects the apprenticeship status and the term. And so as an employer, you should still be aware of the need to assist in particular with the capability aspect whilst in training, and need to consider the moral obligation, not just the legal aspect. So consider whether to guarantee a job at the end and ensure the required minimum off-the-job training is actually provided. So managing the apprenticeship. So have recognised timescales for education achievement and operate a one more try and then you're out system, which is clear. Utilise the conduct capability procedure, involve the training provider from the start and note the educational failings and the outcome, and ensure that you have a full some of the substantial reason process is followed when terminating at the end. So as an employer should still be aware of the need to assist in particular with the capability aspect whilst in training, but you need to consider the moral obligation, not just the legal aspect. So I'm really sorry today, because it is a really just informative webinar today. It is very much reading off slides, but it does help when somebody else is reading them to you, I think. And, apprenticeships, you have to get it right, because the awards tribunal are increased if you get it wrong with an apprenticeship. So what we're talking about now is the levy. So it's payable by all employers with an annual payroll bill of 3 million plus. And each month, a 0.5% of payroll cost is paid with PAYE to the HMRC, and that additional 0.5% is paid into a digital account. And these organisations can then apply, if they haven't done so already, for access to their digital account and start using that account to pay for apprenticeships. So we know that in this country, we need more skilled people. So some skills, some areas we're failing in. So we need to get more people trained up. And this is what the government have done by introducing the levy. However, what we've got to remember is that the funds do expire and are paid to the government if not used within 2 years of being paid into the account. So get in there, get your money back, start using it on apprenticeships. It's such an amazing feeling to take somebody on and mentor them and see them do so well at the end, and the fruits of your labour, you have a fully qualified skilled person working for you. So the levy funds can only be used to fund English apprenticeships. Employers can apply for funding for apprentices studying in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland through their National Skills Funding Agency. So if you just say, because I think there's a lot of people here that are listening that do not have a payroll bill of £3 million or more. But let's have a look at this. So if you don't have that payroll bill, then you are still entitled to funding for apprenticeships. So they would be entitled to 90% of the cost of the apprenticeship funded by the government, assuming that you meet certain criteria and that you would only have to contribute 10% of the costs. So, for example, a £9,000 apprenticeship to be delivered over 3 years will cost the government £8,100 and the employer £900, but these payments may be able to be paid on a monthly basis to the training provider. So that's something to remember there. So what we're seeing in 2019 are a number of developments. A number of changes were made to apprenticeships in April 2019. And these were the following. So companies who pay the levy are now able to transfer up to 25% of their levy funds to organisations in their supply chain. Companies who don't pay the levy and instead pay part of the cost of the apprenticeship now only need to contribute 5%. The government pays the rest. So brilliant. 5 million is to be allocated to the Institute for Apprenticeships and National Apprenticeship Service in 2009 to 2020. So that's incredible. So 5 million will be allocated to and put aside for the Institute for Apprenticeships and National Apprenticeship Service to ensure that all those new apprentices are starting on employer designed apprenticeship standards from September 2020. I just think that's absolutely fabulous news. So what we do get though is we get frequently asked questions about apprentices and everything I've spoken about today, because it is a factual webinar. You know, I can't make it very ultimately extremely interesting to listen to. It is really a factual webinar. Everything I've spoken about is on the CIPD HR Inform, but these are just 4 questions that we do get asked. So are apprentices governed by the Working Time Directive or regulations as you may know it? Yes, more so if they are young workers. 2, does an apprentice get a redundancy payment on termination? So technically, yes, if they have over 2 years service, that applies. Does the apprentice have to attend work outside of college term time? So contractually get them to work. So college during holiday, I would say contractually they have to come into work. So number 4, do apprentices pay tax and national insurance? Yes, they do. And I think number 5 would be on there. If they're still living at home, do they have to pay keep to the parents? Only if you want to take it out of their wages, which will only be an apprenticeship agreement. So I know when I was on the YTS, my mum still made me pay her keep on a monthly basis, which taught me to save really. But frequently asked questions. I hope I've helped you today. It is a short, snappy little bit of information about apprenticeships. You have available to you the HR Inform resources. So we've got the employment law resource on apprentices. We've got the how-to guide on recruiting and managing apprentices. We've got the case report also on Flat versus Matheson. We have the model apprenticeship agreement document, and we have the model contract of apprenticeship document. So I hope this helps you, and I hope that you found this webinar, factual and interesting. Obviously there will be questions, and if you do have questions, please email in events@hr-inform.co.uk, and remember to book your CIPD HR Inform demo and get a look in at what we do on a 24-hour free trial. Have a look at the letters, have a look at our reference material, have a look, listen to the advice, get involved with our advice line, get a free 24-hour trial. And if you are a CIPD member, remember you get 50% off our costs. I really hope I've helped you today. I'm sorry it's such a factual webinar. I wish it was more fun, but coming up in the future, we are going to be talking about Christmas and Christmas parties, temporary workers, agency workers, etc. So that's a really good one to listen to. But also, if any of you feel like you want to come to a seminar and listen to 3 hours on employment law, or even to listen about well-being, I'm hosting them all over the country, and you are very welcome to come. They're free and lunch is provided, so it's a win-win situation. If you'd like to come on one of my seminars, again, contact amanda.chadwick@kroner-uk.com or contact us at CIPD HR Inform. Thank you for listening. It's goodbye from me.